It happened so fast I didn't even have time to process it. 3 a.m. My security badge still beeped green when I scanned it at the main entrance. I was carrying my laptop bag in one hand and the final integration report in the other. I remember glancing at the performance metrics one last time. The numbers were flawless. The prototype had achieved 99.8% accuracy in live testing. Everything we'd worked toward for nearly 8 years was finally functioning beyond expectation. But when I pushed open the door to the executive conference room on the 6th floor, my stomach dropped. Damien Holbrook, our newly appointed CEO, sat at the head of the polished oak table. Flanking him were 2 people from HR and a man in a charcoal suit I'd never seen before. Legal counsel, I assumed from the leather portfolio in front of him. Nobody smiled. Nobody acknowledged my entrance with anything resembling warmth. "Arya," Damien said, his voice flat and rehearsed. "We'll make this quick. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately. You'll receive documentation regarding your severance package via email within the hour." Eliminated. Like a line item in a budget spreadsheet. Like something you delete and forget. I didn't speak. I didn't ask for an explanation. I already knew better. You don't ask why when the decision was finalized in a closed-door meeting 3 days ago, rubber-stamped by people who never once understood what you built. Let me rewind. My name is Arya Mitchell. For nearly 8 years I was the principal architect behind Synergy Core Delta, an adaptive energy distribution system designed to stabilize power grids under extreme load conditions. Not glamorous, not consumer-facing, but critical. I designed every core module. I ran every simulation. I stayed late when others went home. And when Helix Innovations needed a breakthrough on a shoestring budget, they handed me a whiteboard sketch and said, "We need this operational in 8 months." I delivered it in 6. Then came Damien, all polish and no substance. He arrived with an MBA from a top-tier school and a resume filled with buzzwords. He shook hands like a motivational speaker and spoke in sentences that sounded profound but meant nothing. He loved calling the prototype our proprietary breakthrough. He once told me during a hallway conversation, "Engineers handle the mechanics, but leadership makes the machine dance." I remember staring at him, wondering if he realized how nonsensical that statement was. But that was Damien. Surface over substance. Always. And now, here he was, terminating my employment without a single word of gratitude or acknowledgement. I nodded once, keeping my expression neutral. No emotion. No outburst. But as I stood to leave, I slipped my hand into my jacket pocket. My fingers closed around the small metallic USB drive I'd carried every single day for the past 7 months. Not for data storage. For activation. I walked out of that room without raising my voice, without slamming a door. But the system I'd built, the one they believed they controlled, had just initiated a protocol the moment my credentials were deactivated. They thought they'd removed me from the equation. They had no idea I'd just pressed the final button. I didn't look back as the glass doors sealed behind me. But as I walked through the marble lobby of Helix Innovations, something sharp twisted in my chest. On the wall beside the reception desk, once empty, now hung a massive portrait of the executive leadership team. Newly commissioned. I scanned the faces. I wasn't there. I never had been. Funny. I built the system that funded that portrait. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. Started 8 years ago. I was the first engineer assigned to what was then called Project Cirrus, a name we later buried under multiple rebrands. But I still remember the folder label. Black text, red border, classified, high-risk prototype. I was 26, fresh out of graduate school. No impressive title, just contract systems engineer. No team, no lab assistant. Just me, a refurbished workstation, and a malfunctioning prototype that couldn't operate for more than 4 minutes without overheating. For the first 2 months, I worked alone in a repurposed storage closet with no windows. I slept on the office couch twice that first month. I consumed coffee like it was fuel. I taped circuit diagrams to the walls above my desk. Synergy Core Delta, the energy stabilization system that would later be valued at over $500 million, was born in that storage closet. But I was never the name anyone remembered. By the 4th year the project had grown. We had funding, teams, modern facilities. I was promoted to principal architect, though it was a title without real authority. My technical reports started going through a project coordinator named Elliot Cross, a charismatic hire I had mentored during his first weeks at Helix. Elliot was smooth, politically sharp, and hungry to advance. He absorbed everything I taught him. System architecture, stress testing protocols, ethical considerations in autonomous systems. But he also learned something else: how to play the corporate game. Soon, internal documentation no longer referenced designed by A. Mitchell. Instead, they read system development under the supervision of Elliot Cross. In meetings, I was still invited but rarely asked to contribute. Elliot did the presenting. I watched my designs get oversimplified, misinterpreted, rebranded. I corrected no one. Silence became my default. There was one moment I broke that silence. After the final stress test achieved 99.8% operational accuracy, the threshold that would trigger production authorization, I submitted a formal request to be listed as primary inventor on the patent filing. It was supported by every technical log, design iteration, and code repository. I didn't expect celebration. I expected basic fairness. Damien never responded. But Elliot did. "Arya, this isn't the right time to push. Let's keep things streamlined. The board is watching closely." 1 week later, I discovered Elliot had advised against including me as primary inventor, citing role ambiguity and intellectual property complications. I didn't reply. After that, I stopped submitting formal requests. I stopped correcting misattributions in presentations. I stopped asking for anything. But I never stopped documenting. Every line of code I wrote was archived in private repositories. Every system blueprint was saved in encrypted storage. I created secure backups of every design phase, methodically, invisibly, down to the last diagnostic report. They erased my name from public-facing presentations. But they didn't know I'd been embedding my identity where it truly mattered, in the foundational architecture of the system itself. 8 years. They promoted people who couldn't define a feedback loop. They hosted champagne receptions on rooftop terraces while I debugged critical failures at 2 a.m. They rebranded the project 6 times, but never once asked what I wanted to call it. Now I was gone. No farewell email, no mention in the company newsletter. Just a deactivated badge and an empty inbox. But outside, sitting in a cramped coffee shop with cracked tiles and weak espresso, I pulled out a small leather pouch I always kept in my bag. Inside was the USB drive. Black, unmarked, encrypted. It held no files, no blueprints. Just a simple trigger command. The final key in a carefully constructed sequence I had built in secret over the past 7 months. They believed they were finished with me. But they never realized I had designed the system to recognize absence as an instruction. And it had just begun executing. It all started unraveling the moment he walked through the front entrance. Damien Holbrook, Helix's newly appointed CEO. The visionary, brought in to make our technology more attractive to investors, more scalable. That was the language he used constantly. Vision, scale, disruption. Words that filled pitch decks but had zero connection to actual engineering. He arrived 4 months after we completed our first successful full-scale simulation. While I was stress testing the algorithm that managed real-time energy redistribution under extreme load, Damien was redesigning the company's branding guidelines and choosing new fonts for investor presentations. The board loved him. They said he had fundraising magic. They weren't wrong. He secured $120 million in venture capital within his first 5 months. But he couldn't explain the difference between serial and parallel processing, and he never cared to learn. We met officially during a small leadership briefing. I was presenting progress on Synergy Core Delta, explaining how the adaptive controller managed voltage fluctuations across distributed nodes. He smiled, nodded vaguely, then leaned back in his leather chair and said, "What really matters isn't who builds it, Arya. It's who positions it." Those words settled in my chest like lead. I said nothing. I simply closed the presentation file and walked out of the room. From that moment, everything began shifting. Slowly at first, then all at once. Real engineers, the ones who had worked alongside me through countless overnight debugging sessions, started disappearing. Some were restructured. Others found better opportunities elsewhere. In their place came the strategic alignment team. Consultants in expensive suits who used phrases like narrative coherence and stakeholder optics, but couldn't explain basic Boolean logic. Elliot stayed. But not the Elliot I had trained. He'd been a junior systems analyst when I brought him onto the project, curious, respectful, eager to learn. Now promoted to chief technical liaison, he wore designer ties and avoided direct eye contact. He started addressing me as Ms. Mitchell in meetings. Damien adored Elliot. Said he was sharp, aligned with company culture. Translation: Elliot knew when to stay quiet and when to echo Damien's rehearsed talking points. Meanwhile, I was being sidelined. My system access was restricted. My name was omitted from investor briefings. I sat in the back of boardrooms while Damien described Synergy Core Delta as our patented innovation, even though no patent had been filed yet. Not officially. That was the moment I knew I needed to protect what I'd built. Quietly, I began working with a private intellectual property attorney. We reviewed every version history, every build log, every time-stamped contribution tied to my credentials. Then we designed a legal mechanism, a single embedded declaration within a technical summary report. Damien liked to skim documents and sign quickly. So I embedded the declaration of sole inventorship inside a document titled Q3 Neural Performance Review. The legal confirmation was buried on page 9, disguised within industry jargon and cross-referenced with internal development logs. Technically accurate, just not flagged. The moment came during a Tuesday executive briefing. Damien had just returned from a conference in San Francisco, beaming from a lunch meeting with a prominent venture capital firm. I handed him the folder. He flipped through it, asked 0 questions and scrawled his signature at the bottom. "Let's keep the momentum going," he said, barely glancing at the content. That signature. That single stroke of his pen. That was the moment he handed everything away. I left the meeting calmly. My pulse didn't race. I didn't smile. But I knew what that signature meant. That evening, I uploaded the signed document into my encrypted system. The final condition of the auto-trigger protocol was now satisfied. The system wouldn't activate until the day my employment was terminated, until my internal access was revoked. And when that happened? Well, sitting in the coffee shop now, I watch morning sunlight filter through the window. My phone vibrates on the table. A new message from my attorney. Confirmation received. Filing initiated. All required signatures verified. I exhale slowly. He thought he was signing a quarterly performance report. He signed legal ownership over to the person he thought was disposable. Confirmation received. Filing initiated. All required signatures verified. The message sat on my screen like a checkmate move. No exclamation points, no celebration. Just quiet finality. 7 months ago this was only a theory. Now it was law. It started on a Wednesday afternoon. Unremarkable like any other. I realized Elliot had removed my name from yet another system update. Not a conversation, not a courtesy email. My contributions had been absorbed into Team Progress. That's when the realization crystallized. They're preparing to push me out. Not immediately. Though. Damien preferred subtle exits. Gradual title changes, office relocations, vague comments about organizational restructuring. But I could feel it. The end was approaching. And I wasn't about to let myself be erased. So I called someone. Her name was Veronica Pike, intellectual property attorney. Not flashy, not inexpensive. But when I described my situation, she didn't hesitate. "You want to patent your contribution while still employed by them?" she said. "That's possible. But you'll need to be meticulous." We got to work. I started compiling everything. Code repositories, lab documentation, schematic drafts, internal communications, metadata timestamps. Every line I had authored was documented. Every blueprint I'd submitted was cross-referenced. We constructed a legal chain of authorship that couldn't be disputed. Then we built the system. We called it Failsafe, a quiet protocol buried deep in my local environment, structured to activate only if specific conditions were met. 1. My company credentials were revoked. 2. My system access was remotely disabled. 3. The signed declaration of sole inventorship was verified. When all 3 conditions aligned, the protocol would launch a chain reaction. Extract the final working prototype logs from my private archive. Encrypt all supporting documentation. Automatically file with the United States Patent and Trademark Office using my identity and legal counsel. Every piece had to be invisible yet irrefutable. If anyone at Helix discovered it prematurely, they'd see only routine system logs. But if triggered correctly, it would legally declare me the sole inventor of the entire Synergy Core Delta framework. 4 months before they terminated me, we submitted a provisional patent application, a kind of legal placeholder. The USPTO accepted it, pending one final confirmation. That confirmation came from Damien himself 2 weeks ago, when he signed what he believed was a performance summary. In reality, he'd signed off on my inventorship, embedded in the document's legal addendum. He didn't read it. He never did. I saved that signed document, uploaded it to Failsafe. Then I waited. The morning they let me go. At 3 a.m. My credentials were revoked. Seconds later, my access was terminated. The protocol activated automatically. By 8:17 a.m., the full patent application had been filed, verified, and timestamped under my name. Not Helix. Not Elliot. Not Damien. Just me. I remember sitting in that coffee shop when the final confirmation arrived. No adrenaline, no fear. Just clarity. The plan had worked. Not out of revenge. Out of necessity. People think silence means surrender. But silence can also mean preparation. And I had been preparing for this since the day they started erasing me from my own work. They didn't understand how the system functioned because they'd never bothered to learn it. They didn't know the patent had been quietly submitted months ago. They didn't know Damien had transferred legal ownership with his own signature. They expected me to leave quietly, defeated, forgotten. What they didn't understand was that I'd built Failsafe inside their blind spot, buried in plain sight. A ghost in their machine. Now I watch the patent status change from pending review to filed confirmed. I open a private log and type 4 simple words. It is done now. And I mean it. No press release, no retaliation, no theatrics. Just the simple satisfaction of watching the truth stand where my name had been erased. The trap wasn't revenge. It was correction. The coffee shop smelled faintly of burnt espresso and disinfectant. I hadn't touched my coffee in over 15 minutes. The surface had gone still, a dark mirror reflecting nothing. I just sat there, elbows resting on the wooden table, staring out the window at pedestrians rushing past. Then it happened. 8:17 a.m. My phone buzzed softly against the table. One vibration. One notification. USPTO filing complete. Owner, Aria Mitchell. Ref. Synergy Core Delta System. I stared at the screen, not with surprise or even relief, but with the kind of quiet exhale that only comes when something long overdue finally clicks into place. I didn't smile. I didn't move. I just let the weight of the moment settle across my shoulders like a perfectly tailored coat. 7 months. 7 months of planning, coding, encrypting, mirroring, testing. All of it had led to this single legal confirmation that I was the sole inventor of the system Helix believed they could take without consequence. And the best part? I wasn't the only one who received that email. Because the original provisional filing had been drafted using a version of the internal development report chain, the system's confirmation email had automatically copied everyone listed in the metadata. Standard legal protocol. That included me, of course. But also Elliot Cross and Damien Holbrook. At that exact moment, while I sat in the soft hum of a quiet coffee shop, Damien and Elliot were receiving the same notification. Subject: patent filing confirmation. Inventor: Aria Mitchell. Status: complete. Timestamp: 8:17 a.m. I could almost picture it. Damien, likely in a glass-walled boardroom, holding his phone mid-conversation about quarterly projections. He tapped the screen twice, thinking it was some routine notification. Then he'd freeze mid-sentence, pupils narrowing as the words registered. Elliot might be in the operations center, sipping the same overpriced matcha latte he always ordered. Reading the notification 3 times. Then checking the sender to make sure it wasn't spam. It wasn't. No sirens. No alarms. Just quiet collapse. A barista walked past, refilling the napkin dispenser. She paused and glanced at me. You okay? You've been sitting here a while. I blinked and offered the smallest nod. I'm fine. Thank you. She smiled politely and moved on. I turned my gaze to the television mounted in the corner of the cafe, its volume muted. A CNBC segment flashed across the ticker at the bottom of the screen. Helix Innovations faces IP filing conflict over prototype ownership. It wasn't even 9 in the morning and the dominoes had already started falling. I opened my notes app and typed a single line. They know now. Not to be petty. Not for vengeance. Just to mark the moment the truth became inescapable. Helix, Elliot, Damien, they could spin press statements, scramble legal teams, hold emergency calls with stakeholders. But the reality wouldn't change. The USPTO had filed the patent under my name. The metadata, the signature, the logs, they were all in order. And the person who had signed off on the final confirmation? Damien himself. Not that they would admit it immediately. Men like Damien didn't accept failure. They denied it, reframed it, tried to buy their way around it. But even he would understand once the attorneys finished reviewing the confirmation. I wasn't the storm. I was the tide that had already risen. Another email appeared in my inbox, from a Helix legal assistant I didn't recognize. We'd like to clarify the ownership matter of the Synergy Core system. Please let us know if you're open to discussing terms. I didn't open it. I didn't delete it either. I just marked it unread. Then I stood, gathered my coat and bag and walked out of the coffee shop. The wind had picked up outside, but I welcomed the chill. They had tried to erase me. But I'd spoken in the only language they truly understood. Legal, technical, permanent. And I had spoken first. I knew Elliot had received the email too. The USPTO confirmation. The subject line was probably still blinking on his screen while he sat frozen, trying to understand how everything had slipped so far so fast. He had once been the first to believe in me. Or maybe I was the one who believed in him. It's difficult to remember now. When Elliot joined Helix, he was awkward, eager, and a little too proud of his undergraduate thesis. But there was something raw in him. Sharp and honest. And I took him under my wing. He didn't know how to structure distributed load tests or write efficient modular code. But he learned quickly. And he listened. Back then he listened to everything. I covered for him when he crashed the simulation server during off-hours testing. I defended him in performance reviews. I even gave up a weekend to help him rebuild his first failed prototype. We spent long nights in the lab with stale pizza and cheap coffee, debating system ethics and control architectures. Like we were building something that actually mattered. But things started to shift when Damien arrived. I saw Elliot change. Slowly, subtly. He got invited to more meetings. Started dressing sharper. Started using words like perception management and strategic positioning. He didn't talk about code anymore. He talked about influence. At first, I thought it was just professional growth. Who was I to resent him for advancing? But then he stopped including me in decisions. Decisions about my own system. He began editing my documentation, softening technical risks, rewriting assessments for presentation clarity. And then came the email. 1 month before I was terminated. I had been cautious, professional. I wrote, if this system is ever disconnected from the wrong access point, it's designed to purge core operational archives. It's embedded deep. Be careful. He didn't respond. Later, I found out he flagged it as low priority and forwarded it to IT security. He thought I was bluffing. Today he discovered I wasn't. I can picture him now. Rushing into the secure server room, demanding backups of Synergy Core Delta. Voice tight with urgency. I imagine the technician pulling up the screen only to go pale. No logs. No backups. Everything's gone. Secure deletion from root access. Elliot would have asked who triggered it. And the answer would have hit him harder than anything I could say. No one. It was the system itself. Triggered the moment her credentials were revoked at 8:03 a.m. exactly as designed. He was the only one I had warned. The only one who could have stopped the purge. And he ignored me. I don't think he meant to betray me at first. Maybe he thought he was protecting the company. Maybe he convinced himself I was being emotional, difficult, too attached. But silence is still a choice. And so is loyalty. He chose Damien. He chose comfort. He chose advancement. I was no longer useful to him. Not promotable, not politically valuable. Just a shadow in the corner of the room he was trying to enter. And now the system we built together was gone. At least for him. I don't hate him. Not even now. But I do mourn the version of him I once knew. The version who stayed awake until 3 in the morning arguing about algorithmic transparency. The version who called me Arya and meant it. The version who used to ask why instead of how do we frame this. That Elliot is gone. And the one who remained? He's staring at his inbox right now, trying to write an apology he'll never send. I know because I saw his name pop up in my inbox. Grafted. Deleted. I don't need his apology. He already said everything when he didn't reply. I wasn't there when it happened, but I knew how it would unfold. By 8:35 a.m., the panic would have started. The chief technology officer would be pacing in front of the mainframe console, his voice sharp, trying not to shout. They'd be pulling up redundant backups. One in the local server. One in the West Coast mirror. Another in the encrypted vault that only he and Elliot had access to. And they'd find the same thing on all of them. Nothing. No core files. No version history. No build folders. Just a trail of deletion logs, timestamped to 8:03 a.m. The moment they deactivated my credentials. The CTO would have checked the logs twice. Then called IT security. They would have run diagnostics. Then rerun them. Someone would have whispered, "Did Arya do this?" Not out of malice. Out of precision. Because every system purge I embedded wasn't an act of destruction. It was protection. Failsafe wasn't meant to harm them. It was meant to remove me from their grasp the second they tried to erase me. And it did. Meanwhile, Damien would have been holding court in one of those sterile glass conference rooms, barking orders, red-faced, sweating through his tailored collar. I could almost hear him now. She was an employee. That patent belongs to Helix. But even his volume couldn't change facts. Legal would have arrived with tablets and binders. Talking fast but calm. Claudia Vance, sharp and seasoned, would have laid it out in 3 flat sentences. The patent filing was legitimate. The evidence trail is unbreakable. You, Damien Holbrook, signed the declaration confirming she was the sole inventor. I could imagine his face when she said it. Shock first. Then denial. Then rage. I'd watched him for years, how he reacted when things didn't go his way. He blamed outward, delegated fault, dressed failure in fancy language and told the board it was market timing. But this time there was no soft landing. No spin. There was only a confirmation email sent from the United States Patent and Trademark Office bearing my name. I heard later, off the record obviously, that Damien tried to demand a reversal. He ordered the legal team to recover ownership, to challenge the inventorship. But Claudia, to her credit, held her ground. It's done. Filed, public signed. If you challenge it, we risk losing even more. Because she followed protocol. And you signed the authorization yourself. I imagined Damien staring at her like she'd just betrayed him too. But the truth was simple. He'd never taken the time to read what he was signing. I had counted on that. By mid-morning, an internal message leaked. A screenshot of the patent filing sent to the leadership chain. It landed on a tech blog. Then splashed across Twitter like fire on dry leaves. Helix tried to erase their top engineer. She erased their entire system instead. That line wasn't mine. But I couldn't have written it better. The post had over 120,000 shares by lunch. Investors paused. Journalists called. One of the scheduled panels Damien was supposed to attend at a technology innovation summit was postponed due to internal matters. They were unraveling thread by thread. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't laughing. I was sitting at the same coffee shop watching steam rise off a fresh cup of coffee. Not the one from earlier. This one was warm. Tasted like cinnamon and clarity. This was never about revenge. Not for me. It was about being seen. They tried to make me disappear. I let them. And when they looked again, I had already taken back what was mine. I thought winning would feel louder. After everything. After the system deleted itself on cue. After the patent was confirmed under my name. After the headlines started swirling. I thought I'd feel something. Triumph. Vindication. Satisfaction. But all I felt was the echo. By early afternoon, I found myself by the waterfront. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. I'd kept this place in the back of my mind for months. A quiet stretch of concrete pier an hour outside the city, where cell signal fades and the wind says nothing back. I took off my shoes and sat on the edge, letting my feet dangle above the water. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket, but I didn't look. Instead, I stared out at the horizon and let the silence speak louder than anything they'd ever let me say. Brought me back to the last time I tried. I remembered walking into that conference room with printed documents in my hand. A simple request written in clear terms. Please recognize me as primary inventor of Synergy Core Delta. I'd emailed it to 6 days earlier. No response. Not from Elliot. Not from legal. Not from Damien. So I printed it out, highlighted the dates, the contributions. I even attached timestamps of every core algorithm I had authored. Damien barely looked up. He flipped through the packet like it was a lunch menu and said, "We can't complicate filings with too many names. Keep it streamlined." Elliot didn't say a word. Didn't even meet my eyes. I walked out of that room with my heart pounding in my ears and my jaw locked tight. That was the day I stopped speaking. People talk about silence like it's peaceful. But there's another kind. The kind that sits in your chest like broken glass. The kind that comes not from serenity, but from being pushed aside too many times until your voice stops reaching anyone at all. That kind of silence burns. And I let it burn through me. For weeks. For months. Until only focus remained. That's what built failsafe. Not revenge. Not anger. Just the need to make sure that if they ever tried to erase me again, the system would remember what they chose to forget. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. A message from Preston, one of the only engineers who ever asked the right questions. He left Helix 7 months ago, right around the time they started tightening ranks. They're falling apart. Everyone's scared. Nathan's bluffing. Nathan. The guy they brought in to replace me. 3 titles and 0 understanding of how the architecture functioned. I told them once that knowledge transfer couldn't happen without source-level comprehension. They said that was too academic. Now the system was gone. And Nathan was pretending to lead recovery teams for code that no longer existed. I almost smiled. Almost. I started typing a reply. I warned them. But I deleted it before sending. Not because it wasn't true. Because it wasn't necessary. They knew now. Another vibration. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Mitchell?" The voice was calm, direct. "Yes. I represent a private investment group. We've been tracking the Synergy Core situation closely. We believe your work has enormous potential." I stayed silent. "We're not affiliated with Helix. In fact, we've declined to invest in them for years. But we're very interested in you. Would you consider licensing the system outside of Helix?" I let the question hang in the air between us. Then I asked, "Why now?" "Because now we know who really built it." I didn't answer. I thanked him, told him I'd consider it, and ended the call. As the waves rolled against the pier, I felt something loosen inside me. Not joy. Not pride. Just clarity. They buried my name. I let them. I even stayed silent when it hurt most. But now they needed my permission just to say it out loud. And I hadn't given it. Not yet. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. For a second I thought it was just an alarm. But as I turned it over, the screen lit up with over 150 notifications. Mentions, messages, email subject lines in all caps. The first thing I saw was a headline that nearly knocked the breath out of me. Fired at 8:03 a.m. Patented at 8:17 a.m. $530 million prototype no longer belongs to Helix. I blinked. Sat upright. Read it again. There it was. My name. My timeline. Their mistake. The article had been posted just 5 hours earlier, but it had already spread across 4 major tech outlets and was climbing the front page of Reddit. Someone, probably someone in legal or someone fed up, had leaked the filing timestamp footage from the termination room and my USPTO confirmation. The journalist didn't hold back. Helix Innovations, once hailed as the rising force behind adaptive energy infrastructure, now faces legal scrutiny after terminating their principal architect minutes before a $530 million patent filing. One filed under her name, not theirs. I stared at the screen for a long time. My coffee had gone cold on the windowsill beside me and I hadn't even noticed. I scrolled further. Screenshots from internal emails. A side-by-side of my dismissal at 8:03 a.m. and the patent's public record timestamp, 8:17 a.m. They weren't just reporting the story. They were dissecting it. And then came the video. Damien, CO showman spin artist, was seated under harsh studio lights on a national morning news segment. His posture looked perfect, but his smile was off. Tight, strained. The host didn't waste time. "Mr. Holbrook, can you confirm whether Helix currently holds any rights to the Synergy Core Delta prototype?" Damien's voice came out clipped. "There are ongoing legal clarifications regarding ownership. I wouldn't want to speculate while our team evaluates the filings. The host leaned in unimpressed. And were you aware that the filing timestamp aligns precisely with the termination of your former engineer, Ms. Aria Mitchell? He blinked too many times. Look, he said, adjusting his cuffs. We've always supported Aria. He was a valued team member. This development is as surprising to us as it is to anyone else. And that's when it happened. That's when the internet took over. Within 40 minutes, a former Helix employee posted a grainy audio clip on Reddit. It was the recording of my termination meeting. I hadn't even known they'd saved it. Damien's voice in that room. Cold, clear, no confusion, no support. Just one line. Your position has been eliminated. Your access will be revoked effective immediately. It was the perfect contradiction. On national TV, we always supported her. On the record, we don't need you anymore. By noon the clip had been viewed 3 million times. Someone spliced it into